Hello everyone and welcome back to All About Steph 1 with me, Steph, and today I have a very special guest with me. I have Cassidy, who is one half of CCF1. Hi Cass!
Hi, how's it going? I'm so stoked to be here.
Yeah, if you couldn't tell, Cass is Canadian, and if you haven't already checked out her channel, it will all be linked down below. It will be linked up in the cards. Go sub, which you probably already are, but if you're not, go do so. Today, we are going to be reviving the series that I started in 2020 called Stick or Twist. So, if you have not already seen my Stick or Twist videos, it is basically a series in which I look at a specific team or a driver. Today, we're going to be looking at Williams and whether they should stick with their lineup or twist and get a new lineup for the next season of racing. So, we're going to have a little chat about where Williams could go with their lineup in the next couple of years. Let's just start with the lineup that they've got right now, which is George Russell and Nicholas Latifi. Cass, what are you making of this lineup?
I mean, obviously, out of the two, we know that George is the more experienced one. It goes without saying he is future world champion material, but I think that people really underrate Latifi. Yeah, he hasn't had the best season or potentially best performances. We're not going to talk about the spins at this moment in time, but I think people tend to forget that this guy shows pretty impressive race pace for being in a Williams.
Yeah, I think we all forget that before George Russell actually went into the Mercedes and got those points at the Sakir Grand Prix, that Nicholas was ahead of George in the championship standings on race count back, so he had more 11th place finishes than George, which I think is really indicative of his race pace, which I think is his best asset. It's easy to look at George and think, yes, George is great, he does great in qualifying and absolutely steamrolled Nicholas throughout their time as teammates. So do you think that Williams will want to kind of keep hold of him for the future? Do you think he's, going to be at the team for a while?
I think so, and partly because obviously he has some stake in the team, but I do see him as being the type of character. He's really chill, he's a positive energy, and I think once George departs, he could really kind of show himself as a team leader for whoever comes in after him. I mean, ultimately, you don't get into F1 without having some sort of skill or knowledge of the car. I think the longer he stays with Williams, he will play a crucial role in helping with the development of the vehicle and helping kind of propel the team forward. So say what you want about him, but yes, Saturdays are important, but he shows a lot of promise on Sundays, and qualifying is something that can always be improved upon. I mean, not to stick with the Canadian stereotype, but Lance kind of struggled with qualifying at first, and we've seen over the years some massive progress from him. I really think we could see that from Latifi too.
Oh, you're all believing in the Canadians.
I have to. They get such a bad reputation, and I'm like, we're nice. We're known for being nice. Give them a chance.
Yeah, well, I'm going to give Nicholas a chance. I think that good things are coming from him. Fingers crossed. But yeah, we've talked about the lineup that Williams have right now, but it's likely that that lineup is going to have to change for the 2022 season. So let's just talk about a few of the options. So firstly, let's talk about Jack Aitken, who jumped into George Russell's car when George was promoted up to the Mercedes. So he is a Williams junior driver. Is it likely that he could be in that seat alongside Latifi for 2022?
I'm honestly not so sure, and not to make it sound controversial, but let's be honest, Jack is a little bit older than some of the other options out there. It is a well-known fact that the F1 grid is just getting younger and younger, and to be fair, Latifi is slightly older than some of the other rookies that we've seen in the past few years, but I just think with Jack, yeah, he showed some good promise at Sakir, minus the little incident. We won't talk about that. But I just kind of think his time is gradually going to come and go. And I just think there are other drivers out there that show a little bit more of an aggression that maybe Williams need in the team. They have two very smart drivers at the moment. George proved when he was in the Mercedes that he can be a very aggressive and kind of opportunistic driver. I don't know if Latifi has that yet, and I kind of think that they'll need to balance out those two driver characteristics. I don't see Jack as being a person that's going to take those chances for the team once they're in a position to be fighting for points. But maybe that's just me.
I kind of am inclined to agree. Jack, for me, has not necessarily done a really special job in his junior series, and I think there's a reason that he hasn't been promoted to the top team. Top team? Williams, a top team? No. There's a reason he hasn't been promoted to the team yet and is still stuck in this reserve development role. You know, he has been with the team for a while, so I think it could be a good asset for them. But I want to pick up on what you said about George being a bit more aggressive and likely to go for those moves. I now want to talk about Dan Ticktum, who is also in the Williams Drivers Academy. And could he potentially be in that Williams? He is a lot more aggressive and attacking than someone like Jack may be perceived as. So, could he be the driver that Williams is looking for?
This is really my best bet on who they're going to pick. I mean, he's still very young. People love to bring up his past, but honestly, that stuff aside, people make mistakes. I'm sure that there is no current F1 driver on the grid that is absolutely perfect in every single way. I'm choosing, for the sake of this video, to ignore the previous stuff. But I think he does have that kind of fiery attitude that could be a necessity when it comes down to really taking those risks, pushing for those kind of results. And more so the type of character that I think will make opportunities for himself. As great as George is, he has said in previous interviews that sometimes he feels like he can be a little bit safe just because he wants to avoid conflict on track. Dan, on the other hand, couldn't be bothered. Could not be bothered. He is the type, he sees a gap, he'll go for it. Yeah, maybe it'll result in some crashes, but it could also result in some really good opportunities for the team. I think between the pairing of Latifi and Ticktum, it could honestly play out in their favor. You have someone who maybe is a little bit more calculated versus someone who's a little bit more risky. Ultimately, you need a car that will suit multiple driving styles. I think Williams would use this as a learning opportunity to see where can we adjust that, you know, to create a situation that will be good for long-term racing versus short-term bursts.
I see totally where you're coming from. And if Williams wants to get itself back to the front of the grid, or even back to the midfield, really, in contention with the rest of the teams, I think that they're going to need someone who takes the risk, like you said. And Dan is one of those drivers, and he could definitely propel the team forward with his risky moves.
I think it'll be really telling to see how he does in F2 this year. If he's showed a lot of promise, and I kind of feel like he's one of those drivers that you only pay attention to him when he's angry, and I don't think that's very fair to him because he's showed some incredible overtakes. I mean, he hasn't had some bad results, so when you see him this year, I think it'll be very telling to kind of get an indication of what Williams' plans are for him. Yeah. I think this season could be like a real indicator of what his future is at the team.
Yeah, and just on that point, I think in F2, they focus a lot on the negatives that come with Dan, whereas I hope that Williams, looking forward to the future, would be able to focus on the positives that come with him, because he is a really quick and a really good driver. So hopefully Williams will be able to see past his reputation and the negatives that have come with him in the past and look, you know, towards the future. Okay, so we've both got positive things to say about Dan, but someone who we may not have as many positive things to say is Roy Nissany. Now, he's scheduled to do 3 FP1 sessions this season, and he did quite a few in 2020 as well. So he's actually been, you know, testing with Williams quite extensively, and they've been giving him lots of opportunities. Could they give him the opportunity to drive a Formula One car permanently, full-time? Is he a contender for a seat at Williams in 2022?
No.
Ooh.
I'm saying no.
No hesitation.
I think they may keep him as a reserve driver, a test driver, but I don't see them putting him in a full-time seat if they are genuinely serious about improving the team. I'm not saying he's the worst driver out there, but the caliber of an F1 driver is so difficult, and it is so important to make that proper choice. And yes, money and funding is important in a sport like this, but you know, with Williams kind of working more towards that direction of getting the funding they need and kind of letting go of having to do everything themselves, pulling in Mercedes to provide them with a little bit of relief, I think eventually, like, it's not going to be necessary to bring a pay driver on the team. Yeah, some people already say that Latifi is a pay driver, but you can kind of be both. You can be someone with a lot of money coming into the sport that also shows an extreme amount of talent. I don't see Roy as being that person. He hasn't really shown anything that impressive to me in terms of, yeah, he can be a good driver, but he doesn't stand out against the rest. And ultimately, if Williams are really gung-ho about getting back to where they once were, he's not the driver that's going to take them there. Sorry, not sorry.
I would have said if Doralton Capital, I think that's how you pronounce it, if they hadn't elected to buy out Williams, and if Williams was still, you know, under the Williams name, run by the Williams family, I would say that Roy would have been a real contender, especially because of all of the money that he would bring, and Williams being so strapped for cash. But now, I think that Doralton is managing to breathe some new life into Williams, and I'm really looking forward to seeing where they're going to go. So yeah, I'm inclined to agree, but I do see them keeping a hold of him and for a while, just because of his money and the relationship that they've kind of built with each other for the last couple of years. I see him, you know, maybe even taking over that role of reserve driver that Jack currently occupies. So yeah, I think he will be tied with Williams for quite a few years to come.
I think so too, and ultimately he is a safe choice. Say in a hypothetical situation they were to go ahead with Dan, and after a year, 2 years, it's too complicated. Maybe the dynamic in the team isn't working the way that you and I think it would. He's still not necessarily a bad option to have on the side, but it really will depend kind of on how the 2022 regulations play into their favor. I think very soon into the season, they'll already start shifting their focus because there's no real sense in spending that much time and resources on a season that will ultimately be another loss for them. But it's the reality. I don't think it's necessarily being negative. It's just facing the facts. And I'm pretty sure Williams themselves know this.
Yes, I think they're very aware of the situation they're in right now and definitely looking forward to the future. But somebody who could be an outside choice and maybe a little bit unrealistic is Jamie Chadwick. And what I really liked about Williams is that they brought this female into their team, and, you know, they've been nurturing her for a few years now when she won her W Series title as a Williams junior driver. So yes, she has close ties with the team. The only issue that I see with her is her venturing elsewhere and outside of Formula 1 and single-seater racing. We know that she signed up for Extreme E. So could she, you know, come away from that rally side of things and come back to Formula 1 with Williams? And could she be the first female driver that we've seen in many, many years?
I'm so curious to see how that plays out because I haven't fully made up my mind about whether it would be a good call or not. Obviously, she clearly demonstrates a lot of talent, but just because it's a team like Williams, I'm just not so sure because you could argue in saying, well, they're probably not going to get that many points anyway, so it's not like it would be either beneficial or detrimental to the team. I kind of want to see a little bit more from her. I mean, she's still incredibly young as well. I'm just not sure that she would be their number one choice over some of the other options that they have. I think ultimately she will end up being successful in whatever series she ends up going into.
Yeah.
But you also have to factor in, it's so frustrating to have to bring up, but there have been so many mediocre F1 drivers over the year and nobody bats an eye. But if Williams were to bring in a female driver and she underperforms, that could result in some serious issues for sponsorships, funding, team reputation over the years. Is it fair? No. Is it still a possibility of happening? Unfortunately, yes. That is just the current society that we live in. We've seen so many people come in and out of F1 and you barely remember their impact on the sport. It would be such a big deal to have a female driver in F1 on the center stage. But if they are not up to par, which I'm not saying she would or wouldn't be, ultimately we just don't know at this point in time, it could have serious brand impacts, which I don't think Williams are in a position to risk at the moment.
I kind of think that Jamie has made her own choice and made that choice for Williams by saying, I'm going to go and do Extreme E rather than going to Formula 3 or Formula 2. And she said, I don't need to be in single seaters. So I feel like she's almost removed herself from the equation. I don't think she wants to be a driver who's going to drive for the team that's at the back of the grid. And I'm not saying she's going to give women a bad name in Formula One, but a lot of people don't know the impact that a bad car can have. And just seeing a girl being at the back of the grid, it will give F1 Twitter and will give a lot of people a lot of reason to send a lot of hate her way and to explain and try and argue why women shouldn't be in Formula One. So I think that Jamie has kind of taken herself out of that equation by going to Extreme E, and she's not following the linear path that we expected her to follow to Formula One. So I think she's a really outside option, and I'm not sure that she's, you know, on Williams' radar like I would have wanted her to be.
I completely agree, and I think ultimately she's looking at this from a long-term perspective of what is going to gain her the most success, and I would sort of say notoriety in motorsport too, but ultimately, as much as I completely love the concept of W Series. I think it's fantastic, but you still encounter so many people that are like, is this really necessary? Yeah. I think it absolutely is. Mm-hmm. But it just doesn't seem to be at that point yet where people are going to take it as seriously as another single-seater series, unfortunately. I really hope we get there someday, but there's still such a long way to go. And it's a little bit discouraging, but hopefully as W Series gains more attention and a larger audience, and especially now the fact that they are straight up partnering with Formula One at some of the races this season, I cannot wait to see how that goes. And hopefully it changes the conversation, and hopefully it also puts more eyes on Jamie.
Yeah, fingers crossed, because I think we're both really excited to see what Jamie's going to be doing, whether it's in Formula One, Extreme E, or whatever she decides to do. So yeah, we're excited for Jamie Chadwick, that's all I'm going to say. But those are all of the Williams drivers, Williams Junior drivers at the moment. But there are some outside choices. So someone who could end up in that Williams seat is Valtteri Bottas. What are your thoughts on him returning back to the team where he had success before Mercedes?
I am so unbelievably conflicted about this because the way that I see it is George has to get promoted next year. There is no doubt about it. He cannot spend a fourth year in Williams. At that point, it will just be detrimental to his growth and success because ultimately they will not be progressing up the field fast enough. So, do you wait and see if Hamilton will retire, put George up in Hamilton's seat and match him alongside Bottas? Or do you kick Valtteri to the curb, have George come in, and then Hamilton may only last another year or two longer, and you'll have to promote someone that may not quite be ready for a Mercedes seat? It is such a difficult scenario. I think Valtteri would probably be, and not in a bad way, but I think he would probably be a little bit too prideful to return to a seat at the back of the grid. Mm-hmm. He's been there, done that. Williams served its job of promoting him to a larger team. I don't see him going back. I personally would probably see him in some sort of rally series. He's shown interest in that. I could eventually see him going into Extreme E as well, honestly.
Yeah, I could totally see that. I think Valtteri Bottas's legacy, his future in Formula One, is definitely tied to George Russell's, and however Mercedes decide to proceed with their lineup. And I think that is going to characterize Williams' choices as well, because for Williams it would be great to have Bottas in the team. You know, he's now a proven race winner, podium sitter, championship contender. That one's kind of debatable, but he has, you know, done a lot in his time at Mercedes, which I think we forget because he has been partnered against Lewis Hamilton, who is, you know, one of the all-time greats. So for Williams, from a Williams perspective, Bottas would be great for their team, but I definitely think they just have to see where Mercedes' heads are at and where they're going with their lineup.
Exactly, and also it'll entirely depend on how motivated is Valtteri to basically go back and be that leadership role. Go back to the
back of the grid. Yeah.
Honestly, I mean, for some people, it can be a fantastic opportunity and a great undertaking to say, you know what, I'm going to be the team leader. I'm going to help try to bring this team back to success. But not to say he's old, but he's pushing 30. Is that really something that you want to try to completely work your way back at? I personally don't know. Ultimately, let's be real here. Mercedes were never going to hire a driver that could be a true contender against Hamilton. The Nico and Lewis years were so toxic, although very entertaining for fans. Toto himself said, I am never putting 2 alpha males in the 2 seats ever again. And that is not to discredit Valtteri. I think he's doing a perfect job at being a number 2 driver because that's what they hired him for.
He needs to do.
Exactly.
Oh, we're on the same page.
Great minds think alike.
Yeah. So I think those are all the options that Williams might potentially consider. Do you think there are any other outsiders that they might want to bring up to the team, or do you think we've gone over all of the realistic options?
I'd be curious to see if they would pull someone from a different series. I don't really see it happening, though, because there are quite a few people that they could potentially poach from Formula E. But at the same time, would a driver seeing success in Formula E really be tempted to jump ship to a bottom tier team in F1? I'm not so sure.
I think Oliver Rowland in Formula E was a Williams Junior driver at one point. I don't think he is anymore, but that would be really interesting because he's gone to Formula E. Could they bring him back? That would be interesting. I hadn't thought of that.
It's not something that I think would be very high on their radar, but it would all depend on whether someone would be willing to sacrifice pretty much guaranteed potential success in Formula E for relatively no success in F1, but F1 still has that pinnacle of motorsport title.
Yeah.
It all depends on the driver's
mentality.
It's hard to
resist. Yeah, it's hard to resist. But that is good. We've explored all of our options. I'm going to ask you a final question. If you were in Williams' position, would you stick or twist for 2022?
I would twist purely because I don't think George is going to be there. I also think at that point it doesn't serve them any good to keep holding on to him. You have to think about your future, and although George respects the team, he knows that Williams is not his future. It is going to be so much more beneficial to the long-term development of the team to bring someone else in. So my vote would be twist, and by twist, I mean bring in Dan.
Okay, so you're going with a lineup of Nicholas Latifi and Dan Ticktum.
Mm-hmm. That is my choice, Williams.
I'm going to do
watching.
That as well. I'm going to do the same thing, twist, and I think that's the perfect lineup to go with. I'm going to twist and just go different, just to be different.
Ooh.
And I'm going to say a lineup with Nicholas Latifi and Valtteri Bottas. I'm not sure how Dan is going to fare in F2 in 2021, so I think that will depend on whether they want to bring him up. But yeah, I'm just going to say Nicholas and Valtteri just to be different to you. And we'll see what happens. But that is the end of the video. Thank you so much to Cassidy for coming on. I hope you enjoyed yourself.
Thank you very much for having me. I've had a blast and have been really looking forward to this. So thank you.
Yes, thank you for coming on. Guys, thank you for watching. Let us know down in the comments whether you would stick, twist, who you would have in your team for 2022. And don't forget to like this video, subscribe down below, subscribe to Cassidy and Chris at CCF1 if you have not already. And I will see you in the next one. Bye.